Every morning when I go get coffee, those girls stand there and they point their fingers and laugh at me. All because I have a bike that, well, it's a little out of date, I guess. They may be right. It might be time to upgrade my form of transportation. And this might be the best time to do it, seeing as the guys from the Modern Maker podcast just put out a challenge. It's a bent wood challenge where you have to bent wood, whether it's steam bending or bent lamination or kerf cutting. And I think I can pull this off. I've never made a bike or bent wood before, but that's never stopped me from completing a project that I was totally terrified of. So let's figure this out and make a bike, huh? Yeah, a lowrider bike. That's gonna be cool. And maybe they won't laugh at me. I'm sure they still will. But we're still gonna have fun. Welcome to the Komar project. All right, so I guess we're making a lowrider bike. And to do this, I picked up an old beach cruiser online that I'm gonna use as a donor bike and started taking it apart. Now, I know nothing about bike construction, geometry, or its mechanics, but I know that the damn pedals are the hardest things to take off. After breaking a sweat, a couple of curse words, I took the crankshaft off, the bars, and took my frustration out with a hammer. We just disassembled the bike, guys. I think I'm just gonna need the forks. I'm gonna need the, I guess where the forks go into, and the sprocket hub, or the crank hub. Now to start cutting everything up and get our design laid out, we can start bending some wood. Next, I cut off all the pieces that I thought I would need to actually attach the mechanics to the wood frame and started working on the design. I cut a couple of pieces of 2x4 into 1/8 inch strips and use CA glue to attach wood blocks to a sheet of plywood. That way I can clamp the strips and adjust the tension to get the shape I was happy with. What do you think? Is it gonna be nice? Huh? Yeah, it's gonna be nice, buddy. Yeah! After getting the design approved by Thor, I cut out some MDF forms on the bandsaw and refined them on my poor man's router table with a flush trim bit. All right, so the forms for the frame are done. I still have the forks to do, but I'll figure that out down the road because I have no idea what I'm doing. But it's totally time to start bending some wood. I gotta go get some, and I'm thinking of ash and walnut because dark and light, they will contrast each other and look very, very cool. So I gotta go run out and then we're gonna cut it up and we're gonna start gluing it in that order. Unless Thor wants to go get ice cream and then we'll go get ice cream, but then we'll come back and do everything else. So let's do it. Hey dude, you wanna go get ice cream? Huh? Do you want ice cream? Yeah, let's go get ice cream. Yeah, okay. Okay, maybe go back to bed. You know what? I'll get ice cream on my own. Forget you. Okay. All right, without any further ado, let's start getting into this. I actually went with some walnut and maple for this project. I chose the maple over the ash because it was a bit lighter in color and would contrast really well with the dark walnut. After cutting a lot of strips just shy of an 1/8 inch thick, I put packing tape on the forms to prevent the glue from sticking and started applying lots of glue, and I mean lots. And then I clamped all the pieces to the forms. I quickly found that the quick clamps were actually much better suited for this task. They just clamp much quicker than the traditional turn handle F-style clamps. Then I just repeated the bent lamination technique 12 more times for all the frame parts and did water bending for the front forks. I'll explain about that a little later. The next day I got them out of the forms and I was ready to get them flat. I always hot glue my pieces to a piece of plywood and then run them through my planer. The hot glue acts as shims and keeps everything from moving. Once I had one side flat, I could flip them and run them through without the sled. Then it was time to actually glue up the frame, and I'm using dominoes to do that. It's gonna help with the alignment and give me a little bit more strength. The butt joints that I'm using are not very strong, so the domino is actually gonna work like a floating mortise and tenon. The glue up went surprisingly well, and I was just waiting on something to go terribly wrong. But so far, so good. Then it was time to start working on the front forks. I cut out a 1/4 inch thick bracket out of a piece of steel I had laying around and welded it on to the front down tube. I needed to cut slits into the frame where the bracket would go and started out with a handsaw, but quickly realized that was going to take too long. So I tried the table saw, then the router, the saw again, then a drill, and finally a file. I'm so impatient when it comes to things like this. It probably took me much longer jumping through the tools, but I wanted to figure out the best way of doing it. And at the end of the day, it turned out that it was a combination of all of them. Way to go, Bart. Hot water. I heard it helps wood bend. Oh, don't break, don't break, don't break, don't break, don't break. Okay. Stay, because we need a really, really curvy curve. Don't break, don't break, don't break. Don't break. So here's the water bending technique that I was talking about earlier. I let the strips sit in some hot water for an hour. They were very pliable at that point, and I was able to get them into the form with no issues. Then I let it sit in the form overnight, and the next day I glued it all up in the same form. While that dried, I got to work on mocking up the back frame. I use a lot of CA glue in most of my projects, and this one was no exception. Then I welded on some back brackets to the rear frame and was pretty excited to see how the back wheel would actually look on it. I mean, it's in. Oh, it's in. All right, let's kick this thing up a notch because I can't contain my excitement. Oh! Babe! Yep, I was pretty excited. And then that happened. To this day, I have no idea how the glue vanished. It just evaporated from the top of the forks, but I was able to squeeze in a lot more glue in there, and we were back in business. Next, I needed to make the mounting bracket for the front forks, and got my first experience with bending metal, or at least hammering on it till it bent to my will. Oh yeah, and I got some welding practice, which I definitely need. Ladies and gentlemen, we got ourselves some forks. After the forks were done, I was excited to start playing around with the design for the handlebars. For some reason, I had a really hard time visualizing the wood still in its square form. So I used a round over bit on my router and made them round like handlebars should be. It was weird that I couldn't visualize the handlebars in square form, but after it was round, it was fairly simple. That's cool. Then I pegged the hand grips to the bars with a brass rod using some epoxy and wood glue. All right, it's finally time to start assembling this thing and actually glue it together and give it some strength. So in order to do that, we're gonna be using Total Bolt products, which are the sponsor of this project. First, we have Thixo, which is a fast curing epoxy and it has a tension strength of 13,500 and is gonna be perfect for my joints between wood and metal. Then for the frame, we're gonna be using Total Bolt's penetrating epoxy. This is actually gonna get into the fibers and tighten everything down for us. And then finally, we're gonna be using Finish in a Bag. This is Halcyon Clear by Total Bolt and it's an awesome product. We're gonna spray this entire thing and it's gonna give us that perfect glassy finish that we're looking for. And if you go to totalbolt.com right now and put in the code KOMAR when you check out, you get 20% off on all of these products and everything else in their line. So thank you so much to Total Bolt for sponsoring this build. Let's get back to this thing. Most of the shaping was done with a grinder and a sanding wheel, and the fine tuning with a multi-tool and disc sander. The penetrating epoxy is a 2-to-1 ratio, so I made sure to mix it well and started applying it with a foam brush. After 48 hours, it was time for the lacquer finish, and let me tell you, wow, just wow. It made this thing pop. It turned out great. It really did. Oh, I couldn't be happier with this. All right, guys, today is assembly day, which is my favorite time of the build and also the most stressful because people only know you for the work that you put out, not the time that you actually put into it. So the 5-6 weeks that we have into this thing, it will mean absolutely nothing if it doesn't all come together. So let's find out if we got a piece of functioning art or a piece of firewood. Let's do it. Something's totally gonna go wrong. Ah, that was the last bolt. And that means this thing is done and there's only one thing left to do. You know what it is.
All right.
Yeah. All right, guys, so this is Lolo, a fully functioning wood bike. With the exception of a couple of metal brackets, it's pretty much all wood. So when I started this build, I had no idea what I was getting myself in for. I've never built a bike, bent wood, power carved, or fabricated parts. This is completely out of my wheelhouse, but if you always stay within your box, you're never gonna find out what you're capable of, and you might surprise yourself. So I want to thank the guys over at the Modern Maker Podcast for actually putting on this challenge with Rockler and allowed me to experiment and grow my abilities in such a way that I never thought I could. And the entire maker community has been absolutely amazing, helping me through this build, giving me advice, and pointing me in the right direction since I've never done any of this. So if you guys like projects like this, let me know in the comments section below. Let me know what you guys think of this thing. I have my own personal thoughts on it, but I want to hear what you guys think. And if you're new to the channel, go ahead and consider subscribing. Your guys' support means the world to me, and I couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for joining me on this wild and crazy experience. I will see you guys next time, maybe with a sidecar.